Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning. Hey guys, I wanted to hop on here and to share something with you and kind of been on my mind and in my spirit for a couple of months. It's concerning what we call the church. How we have always been told that the church is likened unto a hospital where people come to be healed and people come to be restored and people come to be delivered. And I'm kind of feeling very emotional at this point, but not a bad emotional type of feeling, but more of a concern when it comes to what we are calling church. And it's really heartbreaking when you see people supposedly coming to a place of refuge, a place where they can be restored, but they leave worse off than they were before they came into the church. And the reason why this is hitting home, because I've been in that place where you go in with expectation among people, thinking that you're in the right place to be healed, you're in the right place to be restored, and you're in the right place to be delivered. But then you find out you're among a lot of people that is declaring his name, and they're speaking in tongues, and they're flowing in gifts, and they're prophesying, and they're laying hands, but don't have the full understanding of knowing not only how to approach those that have been bruised, or those that have been broken, or those that are suffering in silence. But I come this morning, I want to talk to the church, because as the Lord began to wake me up this morning, he began to tell me, son, it's time for the church to handle with care. And I said, God, what do you mean it's time for the church to handle with care? He said, son, they got to be mindful and be able to handle those with care that are coming into the house of God to be healed and to be made whole. And as the Lord began to talk to me and begin to share this with me, my mind went back to a time where I went inside of a grocery store and I was looking for apples. And when I walked in front of the store, there was this big pile of apples. And, from the point of looking at them, you can see the one that was on top. They looked at fresh and looked like someone may have kind of took a rag and dusted them off, and they had this shiny appearance. And all of a sudden, y'all, I started digging through the apples, and I was picking up different ones, and I was flipping, and I was turning, and I was, like most people, I was inspecting, trying to find what I wanted to be a perfect apple. One that was firm, the one that didn't have a blemish, the one that had no soft spots. Or I was looking for the ones that didn't look as if it had a bruise or no discoloration. And I remember, y'all, flipping through, digging through the apples and turning certain ones. I remember picking up a particular apple. And it looked it like, hey, this is the apple that I want. Because it looked good from the outside. But as I was flipping this apple, my finger all of a sudden went inside of that apple. It's what we call a soft spot. And as soon as my finger went through the apple, I realized that there was a breaking. And I had the apple in my hand, and all of a sudden, y'all, the apple, it started leaking. Even though I was trying to handle it with care, I wasn't trying to damage the apple, not knowing that it was already damaged. But y'all, it was the pressure, it was my touch that exposed the damage or the weakness of the apple. And it was crazy because once it started leaking and it was running all over the floor, I just had a feeling of feeling disgusted. Y'all know how it is. Church don't want to deal with people that are really wounded. A lot of churches don't want to deal with people that are leaking because of things that have happened in their lives and things that have transpired in their lives. Probably like I did. I sat that apple aside, y'all, and I kept digging. And I remember the Lord telling me, why look for other apples that you think that's more valued than the one you just punctured? Y'all, it's a hurting feeling when the church can see you leaking. They can desperately see that you're in need of being healed. But instead of dealing with you, some churches will push you aside and look for other people that they feel as though they don't have to take time to work with them. I just want to talk this morning because how many in the church approach people, but they're not willing to handle their people with love and compassion? And as God began to talk to me, and God began to share some things with me, and God began to tell me, he says, I want to show you that there are two kinds of people in the church. You have what they call fruit inspectors. Fruit inspectors are people who examine others with a critical eye. They look for what's usable. They look for what's perfect, and they look for what performs well. Yeah, it's almost like they dig through people's lives like someone in a produce section of a grocery store. They begin to measure them by their outer appearance and their past failures, their potential. And I said, God, why are some people fruit inspectors? Because God said some people are fruit inspectors because there are a lot of people in the church that don't want to get their hands dirty with someone who is still leaking from their trauma. They don't want to deal with the ones that are still trying to be healed of their childhood trauma. They don't want to deal with people that are still bleeding because of betrayal. They don't want to deal with people that are still limping from spiritual abuse. Because as soon as they begin to realize and recognize that there's a soft spot, then they begin to recoil. In other words, they begin to disregard these types of people who could have been healed, but they refuse to deal with them so that they can be healed and restored. And God told me, say, son, one thing about fruit inspectors. They are motivated by optics, not outcomes. I said, God, what do you mean? In other words, God was saying, son, they want ministry that looks good, not ministry that does good. I said, God, what do you mean? And God told me, he said, son, what I'm telling you, he said, when ministers are fruit inspectors, they're more focused on presentations and performance and not transformations. My God. And then God began to tell me, he said, son, let's focus on the fruit restorers. He said that when you have the ability to restore, he said, son, these are the people who know what it means and can demonstrate and be able to carry the heart of my son. Because one thing that I found out, y'all, when it comes to a true fruit and a restorer, they don't disregard those that have been wounded. They don't disregard those who are in need of healing. They don't turn their nose up like most church people. They don't flinch at a person's soft spot. Instead, y'all, they begin to see them through the lens of compassion, not condemnation. Because one thing that I found out, and I had to come to the place of understanding, y'all, that when you're able to see through the eyes of God, you'll be able to look at a person and say, yeah, this one is damaged, but yet not destroyed. This one is wounded, but still can be healed, still can be redeemed. This one needs healing and not a time of them being rejected. And one thing that I know and understand about a fruit restorer, they're not led by their emotions or their flesh, but a true fruit restorer is led by the Spirit of God. Because when they're able to discern that someone is among them that needs to be healed and delivered, they don't rely on their feelings. They don't rely on the emotions. They don't rely on the humanism part of them, but they rely on the Spirit of God. And that's where the Spirit begins to kick in. They begin to ask the Spirit of God, show me how to handle this person with care. Help me, Holy Spirit, not to apply pressure in the place where they've already experienced pain. Help me to apply pressure in a place where they hadn't already been wounded. When you're a fruit restorer, you begin to say, Holy Spirit, give me the grace to see them not for who they are right now, but who they are becoming. My God. And whenever you get a chance, I want you to read Matthew the 12th chapter, the 20th verse. And it tells you and it begins to show you that Jesus knew how to touch the broken without wounding them further. Yeah, he saw the soft spots in people, but instead of pressing into them with judgment, he covered them with healing. Y'all, it's time for the church to begin to move in compassion. It's time for the church to really become a place of refuge, a place of healing, a place of deliverance. And I'm going to say this, and I know that it may offend a lot of people, but you begin to see a lot of the people, such as Whitney Houston and Johnny Gibbs, and certain celebrities that very gifted, very talented. And it's amazing that how they started out in the church, but they ended up in the world. And I'm not saying that this has happened to every celebrity that started out in the church, but what happened to a lot of them is that the church was not able to handle them. So they took what they had inside of the church and they took it to the world. And a lot of them felt as though that the world is willing to embrace me more than the church. Can I say something? I want you to take a deep breath because I'm getting ready to go here. And we all know who Ruth Paul is. We know that he's a well-known drag queen. But you know what's very interesting is that Ruth Paul, especially with the spirit that the church dare not deal with, and that's the spirit of homosexuality. Because we're afraid to handle those people that live that lifestyle. So when they come into the church, instead of them being embraced and them being loved, we judge them. We criticize them. We don't take the time out to understand what they're going through. We don't take the time out to understand the mental capacity of what they're walking through because of what they're dealing with. But it's amazing though that Ruth Paul have built a platform and say, if the church is not willing to embrace you, I'm willing to embrace you. And not so much to turn them out, but a lot of times when people are dealing with the spirit of homosexuality, they're dealing with a spirit of lesbianism, they leave the church because they embrace people that's going to love them, where they feel like they can be loved. Now, I'm not condoning homosexuality, but the reason why a lot of people turn away from the church, because one, we don't know how to deal with this spirit. We don't know how to handle those people that are dealing with certain lifestyles. But y'all, we got to be like Jesus. He was able to touch the broken without wounding them any further. What do you mean, prophet? The woman at the well, she was exposed but yet embraced. The woman caught in adultery, she was yet guilty but yet forgiven. And even Peter had a flaw. He denied Christ, but yet still restored. What are you talking about, prophet? It's time for the church to rise up and be the church that is willing to restore the wounded and not re-injure them, but to restore them. I know what I'm talking about. I've walked through this. I've had soft spots in my life. And a lot of my soft spots were not visible when it came to the naked eye. They were hidden areas of pain that I covered up, y'all, just to survive. But what's happening in the church? What's happening to all of these people? They can see cars and houses and they can see certain things in your life when it comes to the prophetic, but they're not able to discern the rejection. They're not able to discern the trauma. They're not able to see that you're in the midst of them and they prophesy, but you're dealing with a spirit of suicide. You're dealing with a spirit of depression. You're dealing with the spirit of oppression. Where are the church? Where are the churches that are discerning in this hour? Because y'all, it's a very painful place in life where there's hidden areas of pain, but you're covering them up just to survive. But you're around people that can't discern your pain. You're dealing with people, they're not able to discern your childhood trauma that is echoing in your adulthood. They're not able to discern the silent battles of depression and anxiety that you're dealing with. Not able to discern grief that have never been able to be voiced out loud. They're not able to discern the secret sin that you are ashamed to admit. They're not able to discern the church hurt that's never been healed. Y'all, I was one of those that when I walked through the doors of the church, I wasn't looking for exposure. Because I knew what I was dealing with. I knew what I was walking through. I knew what I was dealing with mentally. I know what I was dealing with emotional. But I was looking for a place of healing. I was looking for a place of refuge. I was looking for a place of safety. God just talked this morning. That's why it's time for the church to come to the place of being a hospital. And I don't have anything against the church. I don't consider it to be church hurt. I look at it as being church growth. But one thing that I want to mention, y'all, that if we're not spiritually mature, if we're not able to approach and handle people with discernment, we can do them just like I did that apple. We can push our finger right into that soft spot. And we can do more damage than we can healing. And that's the nurse part of me when I look at this. That's the medical part of me. I look at it. That mishandling a womb is like a spiritual malpractice. What do you mean, prophet? Because God has never intended for the church to be a showroom. He's intended for it to be a hospital or a trauma center where people can come and be healed and delivered. He never called for the church to critique. He's not calling the church to critique. But in nursing, they have a thing is that when you first go to the emergency room, they take you through what they call triage. In other words, they're taking your temperature, they're checking your O2, they're checking your blood pressure because they are trying to find out what's really going on. And this is what the church, we have to come to the place of knowing what it means to triage. We have to be able to discern a person when they're coming into the church. Not assume what's happening. But we have to be able to diagnose them properly. Not hypothetically, not using a hypothesis or educated guess, but we have to be able to discern in the spirit. They need presence, not pressure. And it's sad to say, that's why some people will never come back to church. It's not that they don't love God, but because of how they were handled in the name of God. Can I say that again? That's why so many people have left church and they will never return to church, not because they don't love God. It's because of how they was handled in the name of God. And like I said earlier, mishandling the wounded is spiritual malpractice. And can I tell you one thing? God is going to hold us accountable for every soul we drive away because of pride, because of the lack of compassion, because the lack of us forgetting where we came from. We all been an ex something. And when we realize that we all been an ex something, then we can face reality that I'm no better than the one that is coming into church who is not only wounded, but they're in need of deliverance. And I want to say this before I leave you. Church, let's rise up and become the church of real fruit restorers. Let us stop inspecting people and start investing in people. Stop disregarding those that's been damaged and let's start dressing their wounds. We got to come to the place of asking the Holy Spirit to make us sensitive to the cries people don't say out loud, the pain behind their silence, the trauma behind their attitude. Now let's rise up and be the church, and be that church who can stand up and say, I see your soft spot, and I will not press on it. I will cover it. I will walk with you. I would help you to be healed. I'm telling y'all, this is the season and the hour that God is inspecting this church. Not by how many services y'all are holding or how many people are following you, but what he's inspecting is how we are handling those that are broken. So the next time you're tempted, y'all, to dismiss someone because they seem like they're leaking too much, or seem like they're too damaged, or they're too emotional, or too inconsistent, ask yourself, am I acting like a fruit inspector or a fruit restorer? That's one thing I want you to know. God is still in the business of healing those that have been wounded. He's still in the business of restoring those, my God, that have been dispositioned in life. So if God is still in the business, that means that we too should still be in the business. Love you guys. Continue to pray for me and share this message.